If you ever want to be bored, go do something else. Like if you're like, man, I just want a boring job, like don't come to a law firm.
Right.
You'll never be bored. You might cry. You might develop some horrible habits. You might take it out on your family, but but you won't be bored. I can guarantee you that. You'll have a lot to do. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm your host, Justin Chopin, business owner, lawyer, dad, world's best husband, traveler, and adventure seeker. On this podcast, we mix business with pleasure. We'll dive into growth strategies, entrepreneurial adventures, the business of law, and prove that business isn't boring. So let's get ready because we are going above the legal limit. Hey, welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm Justin Chopin. I've got a really special guest here today, Wayne Gonsoulin. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, I do this every time. We start talking, I get halfway through the podcast, and they tell me I never did the intro, and then we got to film the podcast over again, and I was doing that 3 for 3 today.
Okay.
So Wayne is the general manager of Audi of New Orleans.
That's correct.
And I was just telling him that my first real job was selling cars. And so I had graduated from college in Dallas. My buddy, and it was during the dot-com bust, right? So, we see economy shifts here in New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana. You really want to see things go downhill. Mm-hmm. Go to Dallas, and they're boarding up the Bennigans. Now, if you can't sell a Monte Cristo in North Texas, like you're screwed, right? Like everyone, it's bad news. So that's when it was. Like all the Bennigans are getting boarded up. And my buddy calls me from Chicago. He's selling Cadillacs up there, and he's like, "Man, you got to sell cars. This is the best." Now I know I'm better than to think about it twice. But in those days, I was like, well, if Jerry says I should be selling cars, I better be selling cars. And so I did. I just went to the first dealership I saw, which was one of those insanely large dealerships, right? It was the Chevy dealership that the land value alone is unprecedented. It's got to be like 30 football fields, right? Just like all of New York. And thousands of that. There were so many cars on the lot, we would use golf carts to take people around just to get to the other side. And that's where I learned about sales. And it was really, really difficult, especially for a 21, 22-year-old.
Right.
But I did learn a few things that I thought were interesting. And one of them is, and it translates to the practice of law, is that sometimes your manager gives you a really shitty deal and you're just going to have to make the best of it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just say, listen, this is what I can do. What do you say? Right. Let's just go ahead and make a deal. And we do it all the time. I might be having to sell to opposing counsel where I know that facts aren't really as good as I think they are. Sometimes I got to sell some stuff to a court or a jury where I know it's really not that great. But listen, this is the facts I got, and I got to do what I got to do.
That's right.
And if you're too self-conscious about it, if you're like, I don't really want to try to make this deal because then you're never going to get it done, and you're just going to have to put yourself out there. And so that's what I learned in sales. I didn't last very long.
How long?
Probably it was under a year for sure.
That's a lifetime in the car business.
The problem there was I was 100% commission, and I was working about 100 hours a week. We were working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. Yeah. And there was no, like, if you didn't meet your minimum, I don't know that was necessarily kosher now that I'm fully up on labor law, but whatever. So I was making like $1 an hour. And so,
when $1 was $1.
When $1 was $1. And I found, selling, it is not difficult to sell someone a Corvette. Everybody wants a Corvette. It's not difficult to sell something. Man, I still see a Denali on the road. I'm like, man, I really want that, and I could probably, I guess, go buy a Denali, but, getting someone financed for a Corvette, that is the ticket.
Yes.
And when the dot-coms were bust and no money was flowing in and out, that was an impossibility.
Right.
So that was another big lesson. The last big lesson I learned that I think has really carried me through my career is some advice I got from a salesman who said, look, anybody can sell the most expensive car on the lot. He said, but when it comes time to put pen and paper together, you may not make a deal. Mm-hmm. He goes, don't upsell a customer, undersell a customer.
Right.
right? So he's like, I can get anybody in a Cobalt. I can make the prices work, but I can't make the prices work in a $75,000 car or whatever Corvettes cost back then, probably $50,000. And that to me is like mind-boggling because the average consumer is always feeling like they're being upsold. And they're not, or they shouldn't be. If you really want to make the sale, sometimes you're going to have to move them down into something you can get them in.
Right.
Right. And so I always thought that was really fascinating. I don't know that it translates necessarily into the practice of law, but still, it's an aspect of sales that I find particularly interesting.
Yes. Let me address, if I may, the points that you went through, but I'm going to go in reverse order. Let me talk about that last one first. Yeah. It is very easy to get a consumer excited about the most expensive thing you have.
Right.
It's real easy. Oh, let me, you want a navigation system? Let me show you this one. And you could get them sold on the space shuttle, and they would love the idea. With navigation, this one has a navigation system.
Right.
But who can buy it?
Right.
So the point is not so much that you, we call it switching. It's not something you do to the customer. It's something you do for them, because if someone gets all excited about something that they're not actually going to be able to own,
yes,
you hadn't really provided a service.
No.
It may have been fun, they enjoyed the ride, but they have a need they're trying to fill, and in their mind they think it's this particular model, but if it's not going to work, they still have the need.
Right. So I do that for myself.
There's something going on in their current transportation that's not working, and that's really all they're trying to do is improve their situation. So a professional should take all those variables into play and lead the buyer to find something that will solve the problem, fill their needs, but they can afford to own. That's really a service to the buyer. The other one that you talked about was all those cars that were on the lot. Do you know we have to sell all of those? We don't get to send any of them back.
Really?
So once the factory ships it and sends us an invoice, we own it.
I believe that. We had a purple Monte Carlo. And the deal was if you could sell the glitter purple Monte Carlo, the two-door Monte Carlo, that was like, I don't know what the deal was, but it was a good deal. Like there was a bonus, there was a pat on the back, there was lunch, I don't know what it was, drinks,
Because we can't send it back. We have to either pray for a hurricane to come by, a flood, or we need to leave the keys in it and leave it running out front, and hopefully somebody takes it. But we have to dispose of every vehicle. We don't get to send any of them back.
Do you get to pick which ones you get, or is it
to an extent?
Okay.
To an extent, and some manufacturers are different in what they will allow to happen. It's based upon what they're building, right? And it's based upon the contracts they've negotiated with suppliers, and maybe sometimes every vehicle is going to have a navigation system because they got a great deal on navigation systems. But, I'm kind of getting into the finer points there. But to a large extent, we get to decide what we want based upon the analytics that tell us what will move off the lot the quickest, what's mostly in demand.
But generally, every dealership's going to get saddled with like one yellow Santa Fe,
it happens,
right? Like, what's the worst color car right now? It used to be purple, I'll tell you.
Worst colored car probably is what we call loser blue.
Loser blue, is that like
it's maybe about this color,
light blue?
See. That's not real popular and never has been really. But yeah, you get stuck with some of those. And right now, I know electric cars are kind of, I don't know if they're all the craze or not, but it's really not in this part of the world the most desirable product. Now, a lot of people do benefit from it. And in southeast Louisiana, if you have another car that you can evacuate in, it kind of makes sense, if you're just going to commute around in your electric car. But we those, we don't get an abundance of those.
So my wife and I had this discussion the other night because neither one of us need a new car. But because our cars are paid for, we obviously want a new car.
Right.
Obviously. So we're just horrible with these decisions. But the question was about an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
And, in some ways, Southeast Louisiana is perfect for an electric vehicle, right? I probably don't put more than 9,000 miles on my car.
Exactly.
My house is 5 miles from here. But I said what you said, as my wife's not from here, she's from Indiana. She's only been through one major hurricane. I've evacuated many times now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old hat at this. I was like, listen, my deal is this. I'll never forget evacuating Hurricane Katrina, and it took me 12 hours to get from New Orleans to Houston. And I remember when Ike was hitting Houston and people were running out of gas on 49.
Right.
And so my deal is like, I love the electric vehicles. I think they're so cool, sure. But I need a car that can take me and my whole family and whatever else I think I need to bring somewhere 12 hours away without a stop off, in a vulnerable area.
Right.
And unfortunately, maybe for the environment, like that means that we're buying, a car with like an engine.
Sure.
Right? Like
if you're commuting every day, you crossing the causeway, electric cars are a great idea.
Sure.
Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But until the infrastructure can support longer distance, or the vehicles can drive longer distances on the charge, you're going to need a second vehicle, especially what we face down here. The other point you brought up was the very first one, was you said you got into the car business out of college.
Yeah.
And I'm going to interview you now. What did your folks think about that decision after you went to college and now you're going to sell cars?
They never said a thing about it.
Really?
Yeah.
My mother was embarrassed. She would not tell people forever that I was a car salesman. He went to college. Until I bought her a car, then she thought it was the best idea ever.
Well, yeah, I think that there's value in all work, right? Mm-hmm. It is the universal. I was telling my nephew this or somebody, I was like, listen, to be a human being is to work. It is what defines us as human beings. There are 8 billion people in this world, and every one of them of working age must work. Socrates, right? I am what I do, right? Yeah. So we are defined by what we do. And so I think there's value in any job. I learned a tremendous amount selling cars. Did I want to do it for the rest of my life? No, but 20s, it's hard to be 20. You don't know, you're not old enough to know where you want to be, but you're too old to do nothing. Right. So it's kind of, it's a challenging time for everybody. It's those lost years. I was counseling someone here in my office who wants to go back to college, still in the young 20s. I said, listen, I could have gone to college 5 years later and my life would be exactly the same way it is now. It just doesn't matter. Your 20s are a waste anyways. Don't worry about it. So I learned a lot in sales, and it made me realize it was during that time that I realized I wanted to go to law school. In fact, the general manager of that dealership, when I told him, I was like, look, I'm going to need to leave early a couple of nights a week to take a prep course for the LSAT. He goes, LSAT? Why would you do that? And I was like, well, I think I want to be a lawyer. He's like, you can't be a lawyer. Hilarious, because I was the 16th member of my family to be sworn into the bar. So it never occurred to me up until then that, hey, you could be a lawyer. They're all lawyers. You could be one too. But I kind of liked, when there was the contract and the paperwork and, the customer. Like, I liked that aspect of it. But it was working then that kind of got me thinking, like, hey, this could be an avenue for you. And I owe it to that job. In fact, he said, well, I make more than any lawyer in town. I said, well, I get it. There's only one general manager of the dealership. Right. True. The thing about the downsell or the shift, you're right. I shouldn't say it's something, but I do the same thing, right? So I remember going to look at engagement rings for my wife, right? It was like, I remember telling them, I was like, I don't want to look at those items, because anybody can get excited over a 3-carat diamond, right? Yeah. And it was like when my wife and I, she was going shopping for wedding dresses. We're very similar. She did the same thing. She's like, no, I'm not going to look at those dresses because, I don't want that. And with houses, we go looking at homes, and I had a wonderful real estate agent who would never let me do that. He would always say, Justin, we're not going to go look at that because you're not going to be happy with it. You're not going to be able to afford it. And anything you see afterwards, you're going to be so disappointed in it because it's not that house. So I'm a huge believer in that philosophy. That's like, we live in a world of conspicuous consumption. Like, I want a brand new Range Rover with like that powder coat. Yes, right. Like that's very cool. But I'm not even going to go and sit in one because the emotional toll of like, oh, I really want this. But so I'm the worst. I'm the absolute worst at it. I'm the kind of guy that, like, we just built a house. No matter, we had everything, right? From the hinges on the door to the floors to everything I had to pick out. And no matter which one I picked out, It was like the most expensive one. And I was like, my wife was like, "You're just relentless." I was like, "I hate this. Please don't make me do this anymore. I don't want to do this." But it's, I agree. We at the end of the day, right? You need something. You have a need for something, and it doesn't always have to be a Bentley. Right, like you could just be, like, so I'm very happy with my car. It's just like a regular. My kids fit in it. My kids spill stuff everywhere. I beg them not to. They don't care. But it fills a need, and it doesn't have to be an emotional, need. It could just serve a purpose. Right.
Well, in most cases, the person is driving a vehicle that they're going to sell to us, and we're going to help someone else with it, and they're going to buy it. So the car is still serviceable. Yeah. Most of the time, a person is there they need a car for sure. They need transportation, but what's missing is really something emotional. They don't feel as important as they used to. They don't feel like they're keeping up with the rest of the world. They don't feel like they're providing a safe environment for their family. Whatever it is, it's most often it's an emotional void. The car that they're driving now will serve some need, but there's something else missing. And that's where, again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but a professional salesperson can find out what that is, what is that emotional void, and help them fill it with the most affordable vehicle they can. And if affordability is no issue, then hey, fine. Throw it out the window.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. They only need to have one Mercedes. Here's what you do. You give everybody a Mercedes for 1 year. Okay. Right. No, 2 years. It's got to be 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, you ask them, how was that maintenance? How was that service A and service B? And, or you give them a house with horrible maintenance issues. And so my deal is, I don't want all that. I love the Mercedes. Service A and service B on a Mercedes is insane. I don't even know what it costs these days, but I can't tell you. I don't know that I've ever had my car serviced. My car doesn't need to be serviced. It'll be fine. You know
what's happened? What happened is during Katrina. I'm not Katrina. Look at me. I'm showing my age. During COVID.
Yeah.
Many of the manufacturers, and the luxury brands included, were offering such attractive incentives for people to buy that many buyers bought a Mercedes or an Audi or a Lexus that really were Toyota buyers, Honda buyers, Acura buyers, but because of the incentives, they could move up and get that next level vehicle. Now, 3 years later, when the vehicles need those maintenances, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that that's what the total cost of ownership of this type of vehicle is.
Yeah.
And it costs that much because of what the vehicle is, the engineering behind it, the technology in it. But it's a lot more than an oil change on a Honda.
Oh, it's no contest.
An oil change on an Audi or a Lexus or a Mercedes or a BMW. So what we're finding is those individuals, while they enjoyed the car, they loved the car, that reality has set in for some of them.
Yeah.
And so they now replacing their BMW or whatever with what they would have been buying had the incentives not been so attractive. So,
yeah.
But this too shall pass.
Yeah. Well, like I was finally making some money. I wasn't a plaintiff's lawyer yet. I was still a defense lawyer, but I was doing okay. And from another plaintiff's lawyer in town, he had a blue Mercedes CLK 500 with white leather interior. So it was the big convertible. And I still thought it was a gorgeous car. Someone right now is driving that car on the road. Like that car is being driven.
Sure.
And he had gotten it out of Florida from a guy who had like 1 million cars and put like 10 miles on it. So when I got it, it only had like 20,000 miles. And it, I don't know what year it was anymore, but it was a very low mileage car.
Right.
I loved that car. But service B on that car, and this is like, like 13 years ago, was like $800, right? And then service A was like $500. So you were spending, a lot of money every year on the maintenance of the car. And then one day, I go to put the roof down. Nice, beautiful fall day, a little crisp in the air. I thought, it'd be great was if I just didn't have a top on my car right now. So I put my top down, and I hear a horrible hiss, and then the next thing I know, I'm covered in this like horrible fluid. And this is, Mercedes, right? So there's like a hydraulic line that runs right along the roof with a little tiny plastic coupling right by the elbow shape of the roof. And just the coupling just came out of the coupling, somehow found its way into the joint there of the roof as it's coming down and busted the hydraulic line.
Wow.
I'm covered in hydraulic fluid. I didn't know. I learned that day. Hydraulic fluid's under pressure, right? So it's not like it wasn't like a leak. It was like an explosion of fluid, right? Yeah. Like my sweater is ruined, right? The dealership. So there's like two places in town generally that you can either go to the dealership or you go, I don't know, it's like Hans and Fritz or whether those guys. I love those guys if you're listening. It's not really Hans and Fritz. And they were like, oh no, Mr. Justin, I can't fix this. You're gonna have to go to the dealership, right? So I go to the dealership and the dealership is like, yeah, I've never seen this before. And that car, and that's, you never want to hear that. If a dealership goes, oh man, I've never heard that. That's like if you come to me as a lawyer and you're like, oh man, I don't know what to tell you to do. Like, we got a problem.
Right.
And that car sat there for weeks. It was, and it was like never the same, right? So I loved that car. It was beautiful, but I'm very happy with my zero maintenance, American SUV. It has what I need at the moment. But we'll see, because the car's paid for. So naturally, I'm like, man. But,
the car knows when it's paid for and it begins to act up.
They absolutely know it. It's paid for.
There is a profit god up there that kind of dictates that.
Yeah, it's a Ford. So naturally, like the moment I put the final payment, the transmission went out, right, at 44,000 miles.
Planned obsolescence.
Right. So when we talk, so you're the general manager.
Yes.
And so what does that look like? So you're the leader of the sales force, but other than that, right? Do you oversee other departments?
Just sales, and I appreciate the compliment, but I'm not so sure I'm the leader of anything. I think they lead me most of the time.
All right.
But my responsibilities run from the curb on the street to the back lot, sales, service, parts department, administrative offices, finances department's part of sales, but my responsibilities cover all of those. That doesn't mean I'm an expert in all of those by any stretch of the imagination, but I put the pieces together. The biggest part of my job is to try to look as far down the road as I can and anticipate changes that need to be made, improvements that need to be made, processes that need to be changed based on whatever the conditions might be, so that we're not surprised by things as much. And then day-to-day decisions that need to be made, either to satisfy a customer or what type of equipment to buy, if we need something in the shop. So it's a busy day.
Yeah.
It really is.
So it's fascinating to me because it's basically very similar to what I do, right? So I run the sales aspect of the firm. I run the operations aspect. I can't plan for the future, right? Like I don't know what market conditions are going to be. I don't know what politicians are going to be elected and how that might change certain laws. But all I can do is try to put a system in place that can weather any storm generally, with some exceptions, right? I mean, COVID hit and I shut off the marketing dollars, because I was like, well, let's just hibernate for a month while we figure this out.
Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
A 2-day example. I don't know if you read or heard about it, but there was a cyber attack, for lack of a better word, that has affected a computer company that probably 70-80% of dealerships in this country use, that has shut us all down.
Wow.
From a computer standpoint. So we can't print contracts, we can't cashier, we can't do payroll, we can't do administrative functions. And so the question came to me is, do we send everybody home?
No.
Right? You never want to do that because then you're not available for the guests, but realistically, there's only so much we can do.
Yeah.
And then the next question was, well, what about tomorrow? Because our computer company does not have a solution at this point. And it's pretty big, pretty broad range. So the decision was, what do we do about tomorrow? I said, well, I want to be updated several times. By 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, I want to have some feel for what's going to happen when we open our doors at 7:30, and I'll make the decision at that time to go short staff, skeleton crew, but make everyone on call that if they get this thing up and running by 9 a.m., people can come in. So those kind of decisions are what I make.
Yeah,
Somebody has to make them. You don't want 6 department heads making their own decisions.
No.
You kind of want to bring it all under one roof. And that decision was made today at about 1 o'clock.
You send everybody home?
Right. I sent all the administrative people home, people that can only work on computer. We have technicians there finishing jobs that don't require the computer. We have salespeople there still discussing driving cars with customers. So out of 54 employees, we probably have about 20 there right now.
That is... you have to make the call. It's a hard call to make.
You can't anticipate something like that.
No.
It just happens.
And then I don't know, like time people come to me with these problems and I'm like, I don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. I mean, give me all the information and I'm going to pick which course I think is best. Right. But I say it all the time. I was like, if you think I know the solution, I had to tell a lawyer this. I was like, if you think just because you're asking me and I'm being like, yeah, thumbs up, that you haven't made a horrible mistake. I was like, you could still be making a horrible mistake, right? So, you can't diffuse responsibility by asking me. Right. We're all going to be in this together. Let's come up with the best possible solution because this is what we do all day long. Is we not only have to deal with our problems, right? We have our clients' problems that we shoulder too, and our clients are coming to us with like, hey, I have a problem. Can you fix it? And I'm like, yeah, I've got problems too. So I got to fix their problems and my problems, or at least give the best advice I can. Sometimes I'm right, but
The third question that they asked me about today, and
tomorrow.
Third question is, well, are we going to pay people?
They always seem to think that. Like,
well, no, it's natural.
Like,
I said, well, it's not their fault that we have to send them home. So yes, we're going to pay them for the day. Now, if we don't invite them back in tomorrow, then no, not tomorrow. But, yeah, pay everybody for the rest of the day, and because they didn't create this, they didn't cause it, they didn't ask for an unpaid day off. So we'll pay everybody through the rest of the day, and tomorrow morning when we make the decision what to do, people that come in at 7:30 obviously will be on payroll. Those that are on call will not be until we call them in. So that's another decision that you just try to make the best one. Financially, you say, oh, well, no, pay all these people and not working. But for the people and the morale and the overall benefit, it's not going to put us out of business.
No, and ultimately as the leader, right? I mean, there are two things that I need. I need the culture here to be positive, right? I need the morale to be high, and then my customers. I'm very big on we don't have clients. Like clients get treated poorly. They're like patients. Right. We have customers. Customers want a good customer experience. Right. So everything here is like, if I can just make both of those happy, the house will deal with it on the back end, right? Like we'll figure it out. I got to keep my people paid, and I got to get my clients paid. And if they're happy, if my customers are happy, if my employees are happy, my teammates are happy, then that might just be enough. That's good enough. After that, we'll take it one step at a time.
Let me ask you a question. What do you do if, and maybe this doesn't happen, but is there ever a decision you have to make between the customer and the employee? Does that ever come up in your business?
Well, so, we work with customers, clients, all walks of life, There are clients who are dealing with some pretty heavy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They're dealing with very challenging issues. They might be hurt on the job, so they can't work. They're not getting paid. There are delays in getting them into a doctor because it's got to get approved, right? And so there are these things that I'm navigating for them, but ultimately are really outside of my control. Mm-hmm. And so they get really upset, right? As you would expect. Yeah. So I like to take a customer's always right, attitude, right? So the customer is always right, but there are times where I've had to step in and say, listen, you can't call and harass my employees, right? because the doctor's orders to the insurance company haven't been approved yet. I have no control over this. I can't make someone else go do their job. I'm here working. Mm-hmm. The second it comes through, you're in there. Right. But I could front you one visit, with them, but that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. It's just going to put the issue to tomorrow. So the customer is always right until they aren't. Right. At the end of the day, I like my team to know that I always have their back.
Yes.
I'm always here for them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow them to anyone to take advantage of them.
Right.
And so it doesn't happen a lot. But there are times where, you know, we have to strike a balance. Or like, where are we going to put the emphasis? Like, I'm in a different role because I'm not just giving a product or a service. I'm a fiduciary, right? And so in a lot of ways, the relationship I have, the legal relationship I have with my clients is paramount, right? Mm-hmm. So it is like, you know, it's like God, right? Clients, family, right? Not really, but I mean, you know, it's mm-hmm. like that, right? So I have no choice. I have to do the right thing by my client, morally, ethically, professionally, mm-hmm. At whatever cost that might be. There's no like, right. well, unless this happens. No, it's, you know, it is right. It's absolute. But, you know, hopefully, I mean, luckily that doesn't happen very often. But right. it's like, there's never, if you ever want to be bored, go do something else. Like, if you're like, man, I just want a boring job, like, don't yeah. come to a law firm.
Right.
You'll never be bored. You might cry. You might develop some horrible habits, you know. You might take it out on your family, but you won't be bored. I can guarantee you that. You'll have a lot to do. I imagine being in the dealership is very similar. There's never a dull moment.
No,
unless it's isn't. You know, unless it's during the .com bust and no one can buy a car. And then, you know, actually we had great times. Those golf carts were gas powered. They're not like the battery kind that they have now. And so each racing team, you had a driver and you had a guy in the back of the cart yeah. who was a little bit more savvy than like I was. And he figured out, like, if you pull, I guess there's like some sort of governor or throttle or something that you would flood it with gas. And so you'd go like twice as fast than you're really supposed to in a golf cart. So we would race golf carts when we couldn't make any sales. It was, you know, I got thrown from a golf cart once. I tore my shoe. I was like, oh, you can tear a shoe right in half. It's amazing that I'm still alive. So, you know, we had some good times. Well, hey, look, I'm getting the this, and so okay. They're telling me I've rambled on for too long. But hey, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tell our listeners, rather, all, you know, 2 of them, where they can find you, where they can find Audi of New Orleans and your excellent customer service.
Audi of New Orleans is on North Causeway Boulevard. Landmarks, you know, addresses mean something, but landmarks are a little stronger. We're between the lake and Lakeside Mall.
There you go.
On North Causeway Boulevard. Big, beautiful, state-of-the-art facility. We have all of our vehicles on display at the dealership. It's not a situation where you have to go somewhere else to find. If you're looking for a new vehicle or a pre-owned vehicle, they're right there at the dealership. We're open Monday through Saturday. The blue laws still keep us closed on Sunday. Don't anybody think of changing that, please. We work enough hours between Monday and Saturday.
Right.
But we do want to be there to assist the guests. So, Audi of New Orleans, come see me.
All right, we'll come see you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. It's great meeting you.
All right.
Thank you for joining me today on Above the Legal Limit. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more about business and law, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, keep it to yourself. Remember, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We will see you next week. Until then, even though we're above the legal limit, let's drive safely. Cheers, everyone.